Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to The Reason We Learn. I'm your host, Deb Philbin. Um, I haven't talked about the events in Buffalo on this channel at all yet. I was kind of waiting to get my thoughts together around it. I almost didn't want to talk about it because I don't like giving attention to the people who perpetrate these crimes. So I really don't want to talk a lot about that individual. In fact, I'm not going to name that person. I'm not going to talk about that. What I do want to talk about, though, is how we are presenting events like this to children in a K-12 setting. I'm not going to presume to tell parents what they should and shouldn't talk about in their own home with their kids. That's none of my business. What I do want to talk about, though, is how schools, educators, people who have children in their care, K through 12, presume to take on the role of parent in making those decisions when tragedy strikes. And I'm only using this particular case, the case of Buffalo, as an example. It's one of many. I could be talking about really any of the mass shootings because they've been handled in similar ways. And admittedly, I'm going to show you examples that come out of one specific school district. So you might say, well, that's that one school district. That's those people. And it may be true. This may not have happened in your school district at all. And if that's the case, good. But it did happen in this school district, and it probably happened in others. And given the profile of the people, the educators that support this school district or influence this school district, I think it's highly likely that it did happen in other places, and I don't think it should. So the school district in question is Cherry Hill, New Jersey. You've seen me on this channel talk a lot about Cherry Hill. I've brought documents and so forth because I have contacts there. And whenever I have, firsthand accounts, I want to share that with you because that's certainly more credible and real than something I got, second, third, fourth hand or, in the media or something. I want to bring you things from real people, real parents encountering these things in their kids' schools. And I'm going to show you examples they sent me, not just of things that were presented to students. And really, there's only one specific thing that was shown to students. But it's significant, in my opinion, because of the age of the students. We're talking about kindergartners. And I think it's also significant because of the messaging directed at what are basically 6-year-olds. I'm also going to show you a series of tweets that were either, retweeted or liked or whatever by someone who is a huge influence in not just this particular district, but probably most of the districts in New Jersey and possibly beyond. Because I think parents, as I've said before on the channel, you need to start following the social media accounts of the people who influence your schools. So, for example, if you don't follow your current superintendent, you should. And I don't just mean follow what they put up there. Look at who they're retweeting. Look at what they're liking and approving of and amplifying. That sometimes is more telling. In fact, often more telling about what they really think about you, about your kids, about their role in terms of running your district. You need to know that. Don't you want to know the mindset and point of view of the people who are making big decisions about your school district? You probably, if there are thinkers, professors, advisors, people coming from the outside from the local university, you probably have seen in your school district, we are so honored to have Professor so-and-so help us with this or that curriculum. You need to follow them as well. See if they have a podcast, see if they have a Substack, see what they've got that they're putting out there on their own, under their own name, not just under their university banner or under the brand that they, that pays them, but what do they personally think? Because very often they come in to speak to your students, directly. They have a say in writing curriculum. And again, you want to know, what do they really think? What is their point of view? What do they think about me and my kids when I'm not looking? Because they think you're not looking at that. They're pretty sure you're looking at their official page. As Just an Average Man points out here, you can not only follow their official page, you can friend request them and see their real views daily. So you can do that. You can create an account and, follow them like a regular person. I'm not talking about stalking. I'm not talking about anything creepy. I'm saying they are public figures. They are putting themselves out there to advise, consult, possibly even take money from your school district. You probably should know what they think about some of these issues, because if their advice is sought on, for example, how to respond to something like Buffalo, they are seen as the go-to guru for, let's say, how to talk about race in your school district. Okay. If it's Bettina Love, if it's Walter Gleason, if it's or Greason, or what is his name now? Let me make that right. I can't remember if it's Greason or Gleason, but Greason. Okay, that's what I'm going to be showing you today, Greason. But there are various people, Gloria Ladson Billings. There's so many names that you probably are familiar with, but they come up again and again and again as sort of thought leaders in the anti-racism space, in the culturally responsive education space, whatever it is. And if your district leans heavily on their books, on their seminars, their webinars, their advice, you need to be following them. You need to be finding out what do they think? What are they putting out there? If you haven't read their books, read them. See what they really think. Because what they're going to say, maybe on the news, or they're going to say on their official page, might not resemble what they're saying privately. Another thing to remember is sometimes they propagandize their own audience. They do. There's a podcast that I listened to today featuring this Walter Grayson, and he was talking about, amongst other things, CRT and culturally responsive learning, and comparing and contrasting them. And again, you got we're not teaching critical race theory in the schools. Well, no one really said you were teaching Derek Bell to kindergartners. So they advance this false premise that people are saying they're actually teaching the graduate legal course to kindergartners, or they're teaching about it, when in fact we've always meant they're teaching the tenets. Then, as if on cue, I was listening to it, they went on and said, well, the tenets are this. I'm like, I've read Bell and Crenshaw. That's not what they say. That's not what they say. Also, they misrepresent it even to their own audience, thinking, well, maybe they won't go read it, or they won't look, or if they do, or if they have read it, they're going to be fine with me saying this because, they agree with me. They're inclined to agree with me. Now, in fairness, people on the opposite side do the same. I have heard people who are, anti-woke, so to speak, or whatever, oversimplifying, misrepresenting lots of this stuff from CRT to SEL, whatever. Now, that doesn't mean I'm saying they're being too hard on it. I'm saying sometimes they just straight up get it wrong. They just straight up get things wrong about it, or they imply that it was created from the outset to do this horrible thing. That's like, no, probably well-intentioned, but that someone came along and harnessed it for bad intentions. So it happens on both sides, that people kind of finesse the story to suit political purposes. But what I want to talk to you guys about today, aside from advising you to please follow these kinds of people so you can be as up on this without me as you are with me, is I want to talk about what happens when they get those ideas in front of your kids. And it can happen so fast and in such small, subtle ways that you miss it. And you're on to the next day, and you go to the website, or you go to the social media, and it's like, today we made kites, and we painted our faces, or today was pajama day or crazy hair day or whatever. And you're like, well, it looks fine. What is she talking about? It looks great. I don't get it. And then if you go and see what the superintendent retweeted that day, it's like, white supremacy is governing our school, and you're like, wow, that's a different message, isn't it? So you have to pay attention to all angles of this, not just the shiny, happy, look at all our kids playing outside in the sunshine. Aren't we happy? School is almost over, summer, blah, blah, blah. All right. So let's take a look first. I think this is the most relevant thing. The letter from the superintendent, and maybe you got one too, or maybe it got buried, from your district. Maybe it got buried in your email and you missed it completely. I don't know. But let's take a look at what the superintendent of Cherry Hill sent to these parents about Buffalo. And what I would ask you while we're going through this is, oops, I need to give you a better view. That's a little tiny, isn't it? Yeah, I guess this is fine. I can read it. But before I read it to you, would you please hit the like button and share in case anybody else wants to join in on, what's going on. I really appreciate that. They can watch on the replay, but it is nice to have people here live in case they have questions. Okay. Dear Cherry Hill Public Schools community, the Cherry Hill Board of Education and the Cherry Hill Public School District are saddened and outraged by the news of another mass shooting hate crime in Buffalo, New York on Saturday, May 14th, 2022. This, coupled with the news of a mass shooting at a California church on Sunday, May 15th, 2022, calls for us to support one another and decry all acts of hate and racism. Now, notice what he did here. Do we know the identity of the shooter in California yet? Did I miss it? Did I miss that one? I think I missed it. Can somebody let me know in the comments? Is it being looked at as a racialized hate crime? Was it another white shooter? Because I'm not aware of that. Let's see. Shooter in California, church shooting. Let's see. Mailed diaries to Chinese language newspaper. Hate-filled shooting attack. Copies of a diary to a Chinese as he fatally shot prisoners. Oh, so he's Chinese. He's Chinese. So, I mean, I guess one could say it was racialized, but it's interesting that it's not mentioned that way. It's treated, and you'll see afterwards when it comes up to why it's focusing mostly on the Buffalo one. But anyway, all acts of hate and racism. It has been a difficult 2 years for everyone with all too many tragedies, such as these most recent ones. He's lumping together what happened in Buffalo, what happened in California with what? With George Floyd? What are we lumping together? I feel like, there's just too many. So many. Yes, one is too many. But you see what's happening here. We're trying to create this impetus for we have to do something with the children. Please know that the district offers mental health support for students and their families as well as staff. Why are they putting that idea out there? They always do this. This is in New Jersey. That was in Buffalo. Now, if we were in Buffalo, that might make sense. You might know someone. This hits very close to home. Your kids might be afraid to go to the grocery store. Now, kids in Cherry Hill might be afraid to go to the grocery store too, but are they more or less likely to have that fear if school brings it up? Okay? Especially down at the elementary school level. I don't know. I'm thinking that it's, like I said at the outset, it's up to parents to decide. Now, if you have a high school kid, they're probably aware. Even middle school, they might be aware. But don't you think the parents who are getting this, so this isn't aimed at kids who don't have parents. This is aimed at parents and caregivers and people who are paying attention, right? Why do they presume that they haven't already figured out how to talk to their kids about this? That's what they do. They presume we're here if you need us. They're doing that whole we're the center of your universe thing with the community school stuff. Our guidance counselors and student assistance counselors are available in person during school hours and at their office phone numbers and email addresses listed on our school websites. They will respond quickly to students and families who reach out to them. Additional resources, including how to help children cope with traumatic events, are listed on the student assistance page. And then they have all these, concierge service for mental health. I also want to reiterate that our school district works every day to provide a safe and welcoming environment in which our students learn and grow, whether students are attending virtually or in person. We have policies and practices in place to make sure everyone in the Cherry Hill Public Schools community has the opportunity to learn and work, et cetera, et cetera. Just restating what ought to be the obvious. I'm doing my job. I'm doing my job, and I'm doing my job. Thank you for paying me. I'm doing my job. But we do not discriminate on the basis. Why are you saying this over and over again? What if he didn't say this? That's what I want to know. If he didn't send this out, would parents be saying, that school superintendent in our district didn't write to me and tell me that he's committed to not being a racist. He's committed to making sure the schools are an inclusive and safe environment. He didn't send me an email today. I don't know if I feel safe. How many of these go out saying we're committed to improving academic excellence? we're committed to just plowing ahead with our day and letting the kids know that the world is still a beautiful place and they're safe. Statistically, they are safe. That is statistically unlikely to happen. It happened, and it's tragic. And the way they broadcast it all over the news and social media, you think it happens every single day in every grocery store, but it doesn't. And kids need to know that. But when you keep shoving this, like, we have mental health and we have counselors and we have this, that tells you that inside the school building, these counselors, these mental health people, the teachers even, are probably talking about it and probably go, are you okay? Are you okay? Do you want to talk about it? Do you want to talk about it? I'm here for you. I'm here for you if you want to talk about it. So what concerns me when they feel the need to do these kinds of things is that they are making these kids, remember, critically conscious. They got to make them critically aware at all times of all the bad things and the people that hate. That's what justifies DEI, isn't it? That's what justifies all this stuff. We have to make them, we have to make them aware at all times of all these bad things that are going on so they can what? So they can change it? Even if they're in 12th grade, there's nothing they could have done. There's nothing the 12th graders in the school where the shooter went to school could have done. His parents couldn't stop it. They weren't aware. Nobody was aware except, guess who? Guess who was probably aware, but obviously I can't prove it. Well, if you're out on 4chan all the time for 6 months at least, and you've got over 600 postings, including many, many, many where you declare your intentions of what you're going to do. And you actually scout out the location and have an interaction with the security guard. Nobody in all those forums, nobody in there said it. Yeah, this dude's sounding a little like he's going to do something. For sure they did. And I just refuse to believe that the same people who had time to go talk a bunch of yahoos, maybe partially into kind of half-heartedly wanting to do something to Gretchen Whitmer, probably had this dude on their radar. It's just a suspicion. But parents didn't know. School surely didn't know. And this friends, like everybody else was like, what? So the idea that a group of elementary school, middle school, and even high school kids in New Jersey are going to be able to see and stop and say, we're in their own school, or even the teachers, it's really unlikely, especially considering everything the kids sourced for like why he did what he did came from outside school, had nothing to do with school. And probably because every school district is doing this, he was getting plenty of anti-racist stuff in school. I doubt he wasn't getting it at all. And I doubt he was oblivious to it. All right. So you can't predict these things. And bombarding the kids in front of your face with this instead of trying to just reassure them that you're fine and we're fine and we're just going to keep on keeping on. You give this stuff way too much weight. And if there are kids in the district who might be going, right? Don't you think seeing everybody upset, seeing everybody focusing on it, seeing everybody like, oh my God, might fuel that fire? Like there's a dark side to making everybody so aware of their mental health. Other people see how much power they could have over other people. So if you have a kid who's on the edge, I don't think that's a good thing. But that's me. I just don't think making children sit in their heads all the time is a good thing. I've said it on the channel many times. So now I'm going to show you what was shown to kindergartners, because I personally think it's noteworthy. This didn't have to happen. All right, now I've got to do the bigger screen. All right. This was a video of a book. Now the book is lovely. Okay, the book, Harpreet Singh read aloud about his he's Sikh and how he wraps his head and everything. It's actually a sweet little story. I have zero issues with the book. Okay, but it's how she introduces the book to kindergartners. Okay, now there may have been other kids in this book club. It's an online book club, but they showed it to the kindergartners. There might have been kids a little older, but it's the judgment of the person on the Cherry Hill side that decided that this was an appropriate lead-in to show the kids that is concerning to me. As always, if you can't hear the video, please let me know.
Hi friends, welcome back to the Stockton Book Club. Before I read the story that I have for you guys this week, I wanted to talk a little bit about the events that happened over this past weekend. They've been really weighing heavily on my mind. And
They've been weighing heavily on her mind. Okay, go seek therapy. Call a friend. Do something about that. The kids are not your therapy. They're weighing heavily on my mind. She leads in with that. Now you're a 6-year-old, but something has been weighing heavily on the teacher's mind. That's just a boundary violation. You're violating the hierarchy of adult to child. It's just no.
and making me actually really, really sad and emotional.
It's been making her really sad and emotional. It's been making her really sad and emotional. So now the kids are going, should I be sad and emotional? I mean, you're the teacher. It's been making her sad and emotional. Are we supposed to be sad and emotional? This is like the kid who falls down and skins their knee, and you, the parent, or you, the caregiver, you go, oh my God, are you okay? What do you think the kid's going to do? The kid's going to go, ah, and start crying. It's an automatic response, like limbic system. It kicks in. When people react to you like, oh no, it's almost, you can feel it even as an adult. You're like, should I be more upset about this than I am? Maybe you weren't going to be that upset. If instead they're like, how do you feel? How do you feel about that? Okay. With the little kid, your goal is to have them not overreact, right? It's pretty hard to clean that off, especially with something that might sting, and put a Band-Aid on if they're freaking out and screaming their head off, isn't it? So maybe just like, you're fine. It's all good. This is totally, it's going to be okay. Yep. You're good. Let's clean it up. Come on. Everything's fine. Oh, you fell down. It happens. It's like parenting 101. It made me really upset.
Um, and as I was watching the news this weekend and seeing everything that was happening, I found a little glimmer of hope.
As I was watching the news and seeing everything that was happening, they don't watch the news, lady. They're in kindergarten, even if they were in first grade, even if they were in second grade, even if they were in third or fourth grade. They're probably not watching the news. You watching the news and looking for, I found a little glimmer of hope. You're going to talk to little kids like this? You're in a job when you interact with children that young is to be a glimmer of hope, not a glimmer, a bright, shining light of hope. In fact, you're not really supposed to be showing the dark sides of things at that age. Hope is your job. Education is literally hope. That's like literally what it is. What is the point? What else is it? Even those of you who are like, oh, activism, we're teaching them to be activism. Are you not hopeful they will be successful? Like, what the hell? There was a little glimmer of hope.
In the book club that I've been doing with you guys, I think that the reason I got into this book club was there were a number of reasons, but one of them was to have you guys have an understanding of people that are a little bit different than you.
Did you hear that? One of the reasons she got into doing the book club was so that the kids could have an understanding of people who are different from them. I presume you're not going to get it any other way. I presume you don't already have that. I presume your parents are racist. This is 2022, you guys. This would have been already a little bit offensive, in my personal opinion, in 1982. I mean, the presumption, you're talking, first of all, you're on the internet. You're on the internet on YouTube. She talks about these kids like they live in a hut in the middle of the woods somewhere, and they have no access to anything where they might see people who are different from them. Also, little children are the least bigoted people on the planet. So you get in at this age, it's like, I want you to understand people different from you. They're like, different. What do you mean different? Like, how are they different? What do you mean different? Now their question's going to be different in what way? Well, like, what? And you're highlighting that they're supposed to now be looking for differences. They probably don't. Have you ever seen the stuff? I don't know if it's on Twitter or Facebook where they have the two little boys and they had like this, they had the same haircut. So they acted like they were twins, and one was black, one was white. They're like, we're brothers, we're twins. And they got the same clothes. And they dressed up as the same thing because they said they were brothers, they were twins. And yet one was black and one was white, and they were completely oblivious. They called themselves twins. That gets taught out of them. That's not, she's acting like it's inborn, that gets taught, that sense of we're equal gets taught out of them. The racism gets taught in. And she's coming at it the other way. It's like, well, I got into this book club so that you would have an understanding of people different from you. Now, if she said, I did this book club so you could be, learn about people from all over the world who live in different countries. Okay, I get that. That might be interesting. But she's talking about people who are different, look a little different.
And that my hope was that through these books, you would have some exposure and an understanding. And in creating that understanding, maybe you wouldn't have hate in your heart towards.
Creating understanding, maybe you wouldn't have hate in your heart. They're 6. Like, how much hate do they have in their hearts? Maybe you won't grow up to be the buffalo shooter if I read you this little book about a Sikh boy. What? Maybe you wouldn't have hate in your heart. First of all, hate doesn't come in your heart because someone didn't read you a book. And hate doesn't go out of your heart because someone did read you a book. That's not how it works. That just isn't how it works. And I mean, maybe, I'm sure that people out there go, Deb, don't you think you're overreacting? Like, no, I don't. No, I sure don't. Because we're talking about 6-year-olds. And as I said, even if she was reading it to 8-year-olds, now the 8-year-olds, ironically, it might be worse because the 8-year-old has a greater understanding for like, I have hate in my heart. I do. What? I have hate. Until she reads me this book, I'm going to have hate in my heart. Mom, what? Or conversely, yeah, I got hate in my heart. I mean, who knows? But why?
Somebody who is different than you. And I think that if
what she had said was, so you won't have hate in your heart for someone who is different from you. Presumption, you do by default.
And that did those horrible things to the African-American people in Buffalo. I think if he had had a little bit of empathy and a little bit of understanding in his heart, maybe he wouldn't have done those things.
Sweetheart, a little bit of empathy wasn't going to prevent that. I'm sorry to say. He had zero. That's what it takes to do a thing like that, is you have zero. He very clearly was deeply disturbed, probably whipped into some kind of a psychosis. He may have had a psychotic break. I'm not a psychiatrist. I don't know the ins and outs, but it seems fairly clear to me based on what I'm going to say allegedly wrote, because again, it's still being investigated, but what we're told that he wrote. If we go by that alone, this is a deeply disturbed individual who'd been like whipped into a frenzy by a variety of outside sources. And you might want to think about that, since you are an outside source talking to little children, that influences do matter. They do count. And if he went down rabbit holes on the internet and was like spending all his time on that stuff, empathy was the farthest thing from his mind. And I don't think that having a kindergarten book club was going to prevent what we saw. Near as I can tell, he was radicalized in a fairly short period of time. It's not something where somebody didn't read him the right books as a child. Now you're doing what so many people do, which is you're implying it's the parents, you're implying it's his education from day one, that like somehow he didn't have enough SEL classes. Somebody didn't teach him empathy. Now, empathy is learned. I will grant you that. However, it's not direct instructed in this way.
So while I am still really sad that things like this are still happening in our country, like I said before, I do feel a little bit of hope, because in sharing these stories with you guys and in having conversations with you in the hallway, I do feel really hopeful about our future, because I think that you all are so much more open-minded and are compassionate and empathetic, and that makes me feel so much better.
They're children. Children are pretty much naturally, like, at least like, whatever, they're pretty open. You can only screw that up. Now, the empathy part does have to be taught a little more because kids also, especially young ones, tend to be very self-absorbed, but it doesn't mean they're sociopaths. It just means that they tend to be self-absorbed and they do need to kind of work through that. But you know how they do that? By adults modeling that behavior, modeling respect for boundaries, modeling politeness, modeling manners, not saying, and this is how you treat people. I mean, parents can do that a little bit, but I've noticed it doesn't work half as well as just doing it in front of them. Respecting them as individuals, asserting your adult, I don't want to say authority is not really the right word, but your maturity, your role as a person is more guarded with your emotions. That, by the way, is empathetic. You know why? Because if you really got inside, if you decided to walk around in that kid's shoes, if you really took a moment to be truly empathetic, do you think that 6 or 7-year-old or 8-year-old wants to feel hope, like they need a glimmer of hope for the future? Like these kinds of things are just one storybook away from happening to them? That's not very empathetic of you. Empathy would say, all right, we're going to read a great story today and it's going to be a great day and we're going to learn some cool things about a boy who has, particular traditions and culture that, causes him to, he wears a very colorful wrap on his head and we're going to talk about it. It's really neat. Okay, that's empathy. That's saying, how does a child think? The child thinks, I'm at school today and I want to have a good day. I want to leave and be happy and smiling and have learned something and be smarter tomorrow than I was today and all whatever else is going on in their little mind. And I want to get along with my friends and I want to see my mom at the end of the day. I want to have a good lunch. And okay, empathy would do that. Empathy wouldn't do, I'm having feelings and I had to search for a glimmer of hope and it was you. Pressure, pressure, pressure. That's not being empathetic, honey. They've weaponized empathy. They've turned this word into this thing that is really, it's like they're masquerading empathy. Empathy is I wear my feelings on my sleeve at all times. And I tell you how much I feel. And I care. Okay, can you care more quietly? Could you care over there? Could you care out of my headspace? That would be a reflection of real empathy, not this. Anyway.
And it just makes me even more excited to continue to share these stories with you guys. So
it just makes her so excited. So that's, her hope in their empathy. So let's see what this says. In the 180-page document, the shooter specifically said he hates Fox, Tucker, conservatives, and so on, but the media is, yeah. And that's not coming across, as I will show you in the tweets that were retweeted by some of the most influential people in this district. All right, let's take a look first. This Kyati Yoshi person is in some way connected or like an influencer with the district. I can't remember what the role is. The Buffalo shooter says in his manifesto he learned from memes on 4chan that white people were dying off quicker than blacks and that the average black person takes $700,000 of money from government handouts. He believes whites are victims, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, he did say that. But this is, retweeted like this is what's important is this statement. Okay. Just getting the mindset of the person here. That's what I'm trying to say. All right. The next one, I wish I could just cycle through these, but I kind of have to keep going back and finding them individually. This is another one. So this is Walter Greason. This is the guy who helped design Cherry Hill's African-American Studies curriculum. This week really shows the absurdity of comparing the far left and the far right. A far right white supremacist, no, he's not far right, by his own statements, just killed 10 people in cold blood while the establishment spent the week calling the left too aggressive due to peaceful protests at the houses of the powerful. This man is a key player in education in Cherry Hill. This entire statement is 100% propaganda. The establishment will never clearly say that the far right is infinitely more violent and dangerous, even though they targeted the Capitol itself. Oh, we're back to January 6th again. But the rest of us have to be clear on this for our safety and to organize against violent minority rule by these extremists. This is beyond the pale ridiculous, and he retweeted it. Now, I mean, again, he's a private citizen. He's free to tweet. I'm not saying his speech should be restricted in any way. Like, he's entitled to his opinions. I'm saying that you should know what the opinions are of the people writing curriculum about Black history for your school district and giving speeches and teaching the teachers, because he does that too. He does that. He participates in podcasts that the teachers are asked to listen to, and he participates in trainings that the teachers go to. So this person with these opinions is teaching them about race in America. Do you think it's possible that his views are finding their way into the teaching of the teachers? Because I do. In fact, I know they are. So it's not even a debatable whether they are or they're not. All right. Then we get to what's another fun one over here? This one. Again, this is his own tweet. His tweet. Quiet hometowns are sites of production for white supremacy. Well, some would call Cherry Hill a quiet hometown. Does the man who wrote the African American Studies curriculum for Cherry Hill feel that Cherry Hill is a production site for white supremacy? I think the parents of Cherry Hill would like to know that. So my point is, if this kind of influence is coming into the, the schools and the curriculum and so forth, and they're using Buffalo as a backdrop for that, I think maybe it's something worth noting, right? At least I do. I think you should know about that. So those are some examples. There was also a podcast. Let's see. There was a podcast that he participated in. I'm going to see if I can pull that up for you. I don't want to play it because it's pretty long. And I listened to the first 15 minutes and then I just couldn't take it anymore. I'll be honest with you. It was specifically about CRT, and here it's Strands of a Nation. I'm going to pull this up. Okay. But I'm not going to play it but if you want the link or you want to find out, this is it. Critical Race Theory and Cultural Responsive Teaching, an open conversation about what the right gets wrong, episode 7. And we have Dr. Alicia Moore, Dr. Walter Greason, and founder of the Carson Institute, Dr. Carsonia K. Wise Whitehead, took on the differences and interconnectedness between critical race theory and cultural responsive teaching within education. Now, isn't that interesting? The differences in interconnectedness. So they're admitting it's interconnected, but they make a big we're not. The right. It's the far right. It's not just the far right saying that they are embedding the tenets of critical race theory into the critical pedagogy that they are pushing in the critical social justice curriculum underneath the banner of diversity, equity, and inclusion, underneath the banner of social emotional learning, underneath the banner of the community school, and so on and so on and so on. They are interconnected. So if you listen carefully, they kind of give it away. So they say, oh, this isn't this, it's that. It isn't it, but it's that. But isn't it? And you have to listen really carefully. I was listening. I'm like, wait, what did they just say? I had to back up and come back. Very skillful, and yet at the same time, kind of dumb. Like, you listen to them, they're not very articulate. They don't seem to even really understand their own arguments. But I'll tell you what they definitely don't understand. They don't understand their critics. They don't. They think they do. And they claim to. They don't at all. And that's an advantage to the people who are criticizing this stuff. They don't understand you. And rather than be frustrated by that, and rather than have that, be seen as a problem, use that. Use that. Because they're saying, well, they don't understand us and this, that. Oh, but we do. Listening to them, people like me and other people who are fighting the woke, we understand them far, far better than they understand us. They live in a bubble. And so, parents, my message to you is, remember a few things. First of all, you're the majority. And I don't mean that by race. Please don't hear that. Like, I'm talking parents who love their children and want their kids to go to school and get an excellent education and do very well academically and come out reading, writing, doing math, and, feeling good about themselves and the world and hopeful about the future and heading on out into the future to, build and grow and have good individual lives. That's the majority view. Most parents want that. Most parents are not sitting there going, I want you to go be a card-carrying member of the Communist Party and be an activist. And I don't care if you can't read, you can't write, as long as you tear down this colonialist society. That's not most parents. It's some parents, probably a few, but it's not the majority. So remember that. You might think, well, my next door neighbor's against me, or even this other person in Cherry Hills, like, I don't see the problem. What's the problem? It's fine. I don't get why you're overreacting. Remember, they want the same things ultimately that you want for their kids. They just don't understand all this yet. So you have to ask questions and pull it out of them. They don't do that because they won't debate. They won't debate, they won't answer questions, and they're not interested in asking you questions about what you really think. They're more interested in crafting a narrative that you are a bigot and you're a racist and you don't know anything and you don't understand anything. And they can keep going in their little academic bubble doing that because they get rewarded for it. They never need, no one is holding them accountable within the circles they travel. So the people paying them, the people rewarding them and giving them accolades and credentials and hiring them, nobody ever says, can you just prove this to me? Like, where are you getting this information? Because they'll go, research. This is my research. It's great, right? I like cited myself 17 times and then my best friend, and then my best friend cited me, and we went in a nice big circle, and citation. People look and they see like citations, so they don't look and it's like the same person, right? So they're not being challenged. And you can do that. There's no one in your way of doing that. No one's going to do it for you, but you can do that. So you should do that, because what they're doing is they're taking these views. They take a tragedy, and today it's Buffalo. Tomorrow it's something else. I mean, if there's another pandemic that's on the horizon, what, monkeypox? What's coming? What? Okay, something's coming. The next big thing, the next new thing, Ukraine, whatever it is, the next thing, there's a formula. There's a formula. A letter goes out. Oh, we're here for you. We're here for your children. We're going to say, oh, let's read a book about war. Oh, let's read a book about disease. Oh, let's read a book. I hope. I'm so worried and upset. Are you worried and upset? I'm sure you are. Here's a counselor. Get ahead of this, guys. Go and say, can we just have a chat about how you handle these things in the school? Can we not do that anymore with our kids? Can you leave it to us? Can we parent our children for a change when it comes to the stuff? There's not it. And if they say, well, there's children who don't have parents and there's children who need this, super. When they come to you voluntarily and say, hey, I don't have a mom, I don't have a dad. I mean, everybody knows where the school counselor's office is. Everybody knows where the school psychologist is. They make themselves known. I promise you, they're running around like every day handing out cards and pamphlets and things to these kids. There's posters on every corner. Stop by, come and talk to me. I'm here for you. Okay. It's not for lack of knowing, but you don't need to go recruiting customers. Stop. This is not good for their mental health. It's really not good. Encouraging children to stay in their heads and wallow in their concern and their anxiety is causing anxiety. Telling them you're anxious is not making them feel safe. If you're saying we want to create a safe environment, the first thing a kid looks for to say my environment is safe is, how together are the adults in my environment? Do the adults have the shit together? They are they just like pulling their hair out, like, like running around like all the time? That makes a kid feel very insecure. That's why kids growing up in chaotic environments where mom or dad is having a meltdown every other day, or there's constant yelling and screaming and fighting, and, or somebody lost their job and everybody's complaining constantly, like negative this, negative that. That's why those kids have troubles. They don't feel safe. If the grown-ups, the bigger people, the people who are supposed to have been here longer, they're smarter, they have more money than I've got, they run the show here, they're in charge, and they don't seem so in charge. They're like, how's the kid supposed to feel safe? This is the first thing they look for. Second thing they look for is, what are you implying they should feel about a thing? They're looking to you to see how your feelings are. Neutrality is best. I'm not saying being automaton, have no feelings, but neutrality is probably best, because you have no idea what is going on in their home. You have no idea what goes on in their head. Every kid is different. One kid, something like that happens, and then people are like, it wasn't here. That's far away. It's not going to affect me. Another kid might be going, I'm never going to the grocery store again. And there's no way to know which of those two kids you're looking at unless you're their parent. The parent probably is a pretty good idea. I have 3 different kids, and I could tell you with about 95% certainty, if they were younger, which of my kids will be freaked out hearing about this event, and which of them will be like, that sucks. Wow. Are people okay? But otherwise go on with their day. Not because they're cold and mean, but because they like have a little bit of distance and perspective. It would be partly age, partly personality, partly temperament, etc. But I also know that how I present it to them, it makes a big difference. Okay. So and this happened. They've come to me and said, Mom, did you hear about that shooting in Florida that happened? Remember years at Parkland? Mom, did you hear about it? I sure did. And they're like, well, what do you think about that? I'm like, well, it's a terrible tragedy. It's very sad that happened. And I don't embellish. It's like, but don't you think the guns? And I'm like, well, no, I don't. And I just give like the answer they asked for. That's my advice to every parent is like, answer the question you're asked. Don't go farther because you really don't know how much of an answer they want. So I say to one of my kids, like, no, I don't think that's the answer. I don't think that's a solid problem. That's the answer. And they're like, oh, okay. If they say, well, what do you think would work? And I say, well, honestly, I don't know, but I don't think that will help. Because I don't freaking know. I'm not going to start putting crap out there. If you don't know, the answer is a don't know. And you know what that does? That teaches children it's okay not to know everything. Oh, what a concept. It's okay to say I don't know. And these adults are like, well, I have to look and find and search and give you answers to every problem. No, you don't. You can't. Their parents can't. You sure can't. Don't lead them to believe that somebody out there has the answer to every question or the solution to every problem. They don't. And at the same time, you don't turn to the kid and say, well, what do you think, small child who has no frame of reference and no experience in the wider world? And you have this much of a snapshot of current events that's been filtered through me and other adults, especially if they got it on the news. What we are doing to children, we're adultifying them. While we're at the same time, we are mollycoddling them like they're perpetual infants. It's a very twisted thing to do to a child. It's like, why don't you just chop off their legs and then tell them to walk? You can't do that. By the way, thank you so much, Mark R, for this super sticker. I really appreciate the support. And I really do. Thank you. This is, sometimes a thankless task. But what do I mean by that? Okay, adultifying, I've kind of just explained it. I'm feeling feels, 6-year-olds. No, you don't. I mean, it's, again, parenting 101 is your children are not your therapist. They shouldn't know all the things you're worried about and the concerns you have. You don't talk about your love life. You certainly don't talk about your sex life. You don't talk about the fights you're having with your best friend. I mean, I suppose once your kids are teenagers and they're looking to you for perspective on like friendship and stuff, as my kids have gotten older, I definitely share more. I definitely say like, yeah, I had a situation like that once with a friend, whatever. And they appreciate that, but they're also older and they're looking for that kind of advice. They're asking about, has this ever happened to you? Okay. But they're like 16, 17, 18 years old. I would certainly don't say to even my 13-year-olds, like, oh my God, I'm having this big problem with my friend. And like, she's being really mean to me. There are adults who do that. It's like, they think they're the cool mom in Mean Girls. Like, I'm the cool mom. I'm the cool mom. No, you're not cool. You're acting like an overgrown child and you don't make yourself a peer of your child. You just don't do that. And they're doing it with younger and younger and younger kids with the whole, like, if I can't talk about my dates and my sex life with these kindergartners, then you're preventing me from having freedom of speech. You're adultifying these children. You're being a brat. Really, that's straight up. You're being a brat. You're supposed to be the adult in the room. You don't use them for that. Go make a friend, call a friend. At the same time, we're taking kids who are older, as they're getting older, getting into middle school, getting into high school. And we're like, are you upset? I understand you're very upset. Is school really hard? Okay, we'll make it easier. Do you want, school isn't for you? Let's just take you out and put you in a school where you can design everything. And math is too hard. So you don't have to do math. We talked about this yesterday, the little micro school in Madison. We're like, they just felt like too anxious and school was not for them. So we started this little experimental micro school where, they can decide what it's going to be. And we're not even talking about kids who are war refugees. We're not talking about kids with serious PTSD where you might want to say, and even then, the people I've talked to who work with those kids will tell you that while they need to maybe go at a slower pace and they need supports for certain things like PTSD, having structure and having things to focus on to get out of their heads and away from the little nightmare visions in their face is what they need. Not constant, fill out this questionnaire about how depressed you are today as compared to yesterday. Now, how do you feel after lunch? So before lunch, you said that you felt a little sad. Do you feel better? So you said you weren't getting along with your mom. No. I mean, we don't do that to babies. We don't do that to little children. We don't, for the simple reason that we don't want them to stay fragile. We don't want them to feel like the world is a scary place. They will not grow up and be self-sufficient. They will not look outside the school walls with anything resembling hope. And some of them may go all the way to suicidal ideation, self-harm, extreme levels of anxiety. And this is very true. Most people are developmentally stunted and trapped in 11th grade. I think actually, Katie, that might be generous. 11th grade. I think, thinking back, I mean, it's generational, obviously, so it might be different for today's generation. But if I look back to people in 11th grade, my generation versus 11th grade today, I would say the 11th graders today are a little bit more like 8th graders were. 9th, maybe, if I'm being generous. And it's not their fault. Please don't hear me like blaming them. Adults have done this. Adults have done this over the years. We've been wrapping them in bubble wrap, and you can't go anywhere without, you can't take away their phone. What if there's an emergency? Like, they're upstairs. They're upstairs in your house, in your own house. You can take it away. You can. They've been on the phone for 6 straight hours. I think you can take the phone away. Well, I don't want to get in a fight, and then they're gonna hate me, and it's too hard, and all their friends are online, and what am I gonna do? Who's the child? And so what do they start feeling like? They start feeling like exactly what you're describing. Someone who's going to break and crack and fall apart if they don't have their device, if they're not coddled and catered to, and everybody isn't, validating their every breath. I think infantilizing is an insult to infants. Infants are really creative and fierce little individuals. Have you ever watched an infant discover the world? Infants are amazing. Infants crawl. I mean, they're like, I can't really move my body properly, but I'm gonna do this thing, right? I mean, infants try to do stuff they've literally never done before without any fear at all. I don't know if I want to compare them to infants. They make themselves seem as helpless, perhaps, but they're not. So I don't know what you would compare that to. A crotchety old man with an attitude adjustment problem, or a woman. It's like somebody who's just like, the world owes me a favor, goddammit. I mean, I don't know, but it's not infants. Infants and toddlers are phenomenal. Like, if we could just bottle that, curiosity and what is this? What does it do? How many different ways can I play with it without any fear whatsoever? I mean, we need more of that. Not, I have feels. And I think how we talk about these tragedies is the tip of the spear or the tip of the iceberg. I don't know, whatever. I'm getting all my metaphors mixed up, but it's very telling. It's very telling to me. There are so many other examples. This is just one I pulled because it's so obvious and in your face, but all of these things, all the difficulties. Oh, COVID, are you scared? People aren't wearing their masks. Are you scared? Instead of teaching these kids, like, hey, people can make choices. Some people are more risk tolerant than others. You're perfectly free to wear a mask. Of course you are. And they're perfectly free not to. And that's what makes the world go around. Let's continue on with our reading or whatever. But instead of doing that, that's actually, you want to talk about social emotional learning and social emotional skills. I would say the number one skill, and it's ironic because Castle puts it in there, personal, self-awareness, personal responsibility. And then you read the descriptions like that's not what that means. That's not what that means. And they have definitions like collective this and collective that and doing for others. I'm like, no. Personal responsibility is my feelings are my problem. My opinions are my own, and nobody else has to agree with me. Not everyone's going to like me, and that's okay. And I'm going to, have to take care of myself someday. And I mean, and I grant you don't take a 6-year-old and throw them into that deep end. But there are subtle ways. There are ways you talk to a 6-year-old about how the fact that, somebody who doesn't want to play with them is not the end of the world. There are ways you talk to a 10-year-old about it. There are ways you talk to a 15-year-old about it. It's all, time, manner, place, age appropriateness. But the core message is the same. You own your life. You decide who you are, not me. What the heck am I? Even if I'm your parent, I don't tell my children who they are. They're my children. And I go, you're this. And if I did, pretty much everybody who ever saw me do it would be like, wow, what a bitch. Like, they would be like, that's a terrible thing to do to your children. Like, you're going to do this and you are this. And then we've seen movies. They made movies about it. Freaking Mary Tyler Moore. Remember that movie with Timothy Hutton, Ordinary People? I'm dating myself, I realize, but it's a phenomenal movie. Total narcissist, this woman. But she was like, you will do this and you will go here and wear these clothes. And, blah, blah, blah. And we all recognized what she was. We're like, what a monster. That she's telling this child who he is and what he needs to feel. And that's an extreme case. And of course, there was Mommy Dearest and so forth. But what do you think they're doing? Just because they put a smiley face on it and they say it in a sweet, sugary voice, and it's very, and now we're going to look for where you are on the race matrix. Let's take the Pantone chip. What shade of brown are you? Oh, you're not brown. I'm sorry. I don't care how smiley the demon is when it's telling your child what to feel and how, or projecting that there should be feels in an otherwise normal day. Kid woke up probably completely oblivious to Buffalo, lives far away from Buffalo, doesn't know anything about it. Is like, I'm going to hear a story today. And it's like, are these things happening in our country? How many of those kids do you think went home and went, Mom, what's happening in our country? My teacher was really sad today and I don't understand why. Now the parent is like, wasn't going to talk about this. Wasn't going to touch this with a 10-foot pole. My child does not need to hear about people being killed in the supermarket. So, how do I remember that movie? You're very funny. Okay, let's take a look at some of these. Let's look at some of the comments here. My 5-year-old niece almost got me beat up at the supermarket. There was a bodybuilder guy behind us in line just staring at us, and my niece turns around and tells him, you got eye problems. Yes, this is the nature of little kids. And can you imagine? They go to the teacher and the teacher's saying these things. I mean, kids just going to go blurt out whatever. But we have to make sure they don't have hate in their heart. Don't forget. Let's see. I was thinking of infantilism where corporations treat people like children, adulting, or maybe the history of how freedoms we enjoy today can be. Yes. I hate that word adulting. I'm adulting. I did my laundry. I'm adulting. I actually went to the grocery store instead of using Instacart. I'm like, people make me sick. Like, I'm sorry. And I use Instacart. Okay. So like, no shade on people who do, but it's not a brag. It's not even a humble brag. It's not that you went to the freaking store. Let's see. Yeah. I hate the word adulting. Let's see. What else do we have? Yes. Age appropriate. What a concept. I genuinely believe, it's not I think, I know, okay, that teachers today, the young ones, like going into teachers college and coming out, are not being taught, and they should be, what is age appropriate to talk about, what vocabulary these kids likely have. They're using me. You heard the words this woman is using. I'm sitting there like, have you ever actually met children this age? Like really had a conversation? And I understand there are really bright, savvy kids out there, especially with technology. They're a little savvier in certain respects than we were at that age. They shouldn't be, because at that age, it shouldn't be on tech, but they may know certain words, but not that. No. And even if they know them, they don't really know them. They don't understand the context. They don't understand the full meaning of the things that she was talking about and why she was sad and why she needed a glimmer of hope. What if they asked? That was on video, shown to kids, many, many hours away from wherever she was. She wasn't in the same district. It's just they were watching it online. But she said in the hallways. Now, I'm very curious. What if one of those students said, well, why are you upset? Like, what happened? I would really be fascinated to know what her description was to these children. That bad man who did this bad thing and whatever. And she didn't say it in the video, but she did in person. Don't you as a parent kind of want to know what they're saying about these things? Wouldn't you rather they just didn't? Wouldn't you rather really they just didn't till at least high school? And then in high school, they did it in some kind of a larger context where, perhaps they talk about, just very briefly, just say, look, guys, we don't want to give attention to the person who did this. And there's no glory here. There's nothing, we don't want to delve into it. And I certainly want to wreck your day. I'm just going to say, if any of you ever are having thoughts about harming yourself or others, no harm, no foul. Here's people you can go talk to confidentially, whatever. That is something you need to take care of. And there's people who can help you, but we're going to move on because we really don't want to give this any more attention than it deserves. I genuinely believe that the amount of attention we give these things, especially when you get into the older kids, creates copycats. I absolutely do. And so I think you get to the older kids, it's not that they can't handle it. Certainly the parent could sit at home and talk about it with their own child. They know what they can talk to their kid about. But you got to be really careful to, it's like, oh, and he did this, and it's the right wing, and it's that, and it's the other. How do you know there's no kid sitting in class who agreed with him? And now that you're drilling it into his head that this kid is this white supremacist, blah, 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 maybe he's going to sit there and go, okay. You have no idea. So don't give him more attention than he deserves. This is 100% his responsibility. Blaming it on others teaches the kids to blame horrible things on other people, and further solidifies the message that you're now giving them since however young, that things they do and say are not their responsibility. It's the fault of society. It's the fault of this. It's the fault of that. So if they're talking about it that way, like I saw in the tweets, small towns are just production mills or whatever for white supremacy. Yeah, that we can't. No. So that's basically, what is, Katie says, how does that have to be taught? It's so frustrating. What is wrong with you when it doesn't occur to you not to say big things to little kids? I completely agree. And Christian says, with how digitally connected teenagers are, I'm doubtful about the influence these teachers supposedly have. Thank you. I did a poll in my YouTube community, granted, not super scientific, but I think at the height of it, I think there were over like 800 responses. I mean, it got a decent response, asking people to just recollect who the biggest influences were on how they treat other people. How they treat other people, their manners, the politeness, how they feel about themselves, their social and emotional skills. Who did they think were their biggest influences? Far and away, like about 80%, maybe a little higher than 80%, parents or, immediate relatives. And second to that, it was a tie between, pretty close, I would say it's exact tie, between faith and peers. And way down at the end, school teachers. The smallest, it was like 3%. That's true for me. I can't speak for the rest of you. And that's not to say that I didn't have a teacher here and a teacher there who were influences on me. But you know how they influenced me? My academics. They influenced my attitude towards learning. They influenced my attitudes towards myself as a learner of academic subjects. They influenced my attitude towards the specific subject, like the passion for it I developed because it was contagious from the teacher. Those were things my mom and dad really couldn't give me as well, or my peers, certainly not. But they did that. They did their job, and I can count them on one hand. And I had public and private school, and I still can count them on one hand, and it's about 3 people in 13 years of school. And they were stupendous, like amazing people, amazing teachers. I credit so much of who I am to them, but 3 and a 13 years. And they absolutely did not influence who I am socially or emotionally, not even a little bit. In fact, if I go to one of the most influential teachers I had who was actually in college, it's a damn good thing he didn't influence me socially or emotionally, because he was kind of, he would stand at the front of the room. We had those, college classroom was huge, with the like auditorium seating, whatever. And I was the obnoxious one who would sit right down in the front. My hand was like this, like a little gopher. And he was the guy going, anyone but Philman, somebody else, like, right? And they were English classes. I was American Studies major. And he would walk around with his hands in the back of his pants like this. And he was from South Dakota. And he was kind of, gray, mussed up hair, right? And he'd just look out at the room and he'd go, toads. You're all a bunch of toads. He was kind of mean, but in like a loving way, like, you didn't do the assignment, shut up, get out of my class. Like he was like that. And he was amazing. I learned more from this man about literature and about history and about so many things, but it's a damn good thing I didn't learn how to treat people from him because he wasn't known for his politeness. And that's what I look to my teachers for. But now they're just like, oh, I'm going to teach you social emotional skills. No, you're probably not. You're just not. In the little kids, you're going to groom them. Let's be honest. If you're successful, what you've done is called grooming. Now, why do I call it grooming? It's not the groom. Don't get all sex thing, okay? Because grooming is about a relationship. And yes, sometimes grooming is done by people who have malicious intent of a sexual nature. That's why you say the word grooming, people go like this. But ideological grooming and grooming for control is much more common. For control and manipulation and establishing an unhealthy relationship is extraordinarily common. And it doesn't have to have sex involved anywhere. It's when, as I said, when you take a peer approach to a child who's much younger than you should take a peer approach to a child ever, even if they're 18 and you're the 25-year-old teacher. You should never do that because you are still in a position of authority. There is a hierarchy there. You're giving them a grade, and you must maintain that emotional distance. It is essential for them, not just yourself. That is a kindness. That is empathy. That is compassionate. You do not violate that boundary. You're not their friend. You're not their comrade. You're not their colleague. You're not co-creating a goddamn thing. Anything you do that you call co-creation, whatever, you're grooming. Because that relationship exists whether you like it or not, just by virtue of the fact that you get paid to be in the room with them. All right? So this is something I will die on this hill. And when you talk about younger kids, you don't do this like, tell me your secrets and I won't tell your mom and dad and it's okay and I'll be your mommy and I'll love you. And it's like, we've seen them. We've seen them doing, they think they're being so kind and they think they're being so loving and, oh, come here, I love you guys. I love you unconditionally. My kids, you're my kids. And I just, I'm going to miss you so much. And let's talk about my relationships and your relationships. No. Now the kid has a level of confusion about where they stand and where you stand. And now they're more inclined to overshare things that are none of your damn business about their feelings about mom or dad or their siblings or their dog or their grandma or whatever. That is not your business. You don't need that information to teach them effectively. In fact, I would say you definitely don't need, like, it's going to get in the way. You are getting too enmeshed. Enmeshed is the word. Emotionally enmeshed and invested in your students. And that's not healthy for them or for you. You're not their parent. You can't control what goes on in their home. And the greatest gift you can give them is distance from that, especially if it's bad. If it's good, the greatest gift you can give them is distance from that, because you shouldn't touch that. That's a sacred relationship. Don't mess with it. So either way, whether it's a great family life or a crappy family life, don't freaking mess with that. If they need level tier 2 and tier 3 supports, it'll make itself known. But don't approach every child like they need that. That's what they've done post-COVID. They're using it as a justification that every child has PTSD. Every child is traumatized. Every child. Well, if you say they are, they will be. If you say they are, guaranteed you will make it happen. Self-fulfilling prophecy. What we are seeing now in our schools are children who are being taught mental illness. And worst of all, they're being taught that mental illness or these symptoms thereof is an identity. I have anxiety. I'm bipolar. Well, first of all, no child knows they're bipolar. Bipolar disorder doesn't get diagnosed until you're upper teens at the earliest. And even then it's a little sketchy. It usually takes till young adulthood to get a really conclusive diagnosis. You may see symptoms beforehand, but certainly no child should be self-diagnosing, least of all with the help of a teacher or the internet. And if they get it on the internet and they come into school and go, I think I'm bipolar, and the teacher goes, oh, okay, you're bipolar. I mean, no. And then we've talked about this. Gender dysphoria is a mental health concern. It is not something we reward and we praise and we go, here's a closet full of clothes and, you're never going to get any better. We're just going to lean way into this. What's next? The anorexic child says, well, I'm an anorexic. That's my identity. Okay, let's sign you up for liposuction. Let's hide all the mirrors. Nobody eat in front of her. No eating. We can't eat because it's going to trigger. We don't do that, but we do that. I mean, they're turning these things into a kind of a protective virtue shield, and using, then they weaponize the empathy. It's like, feel for me, feel these things for me because I have this thing. Or the teacher says, you must feel these things for that kid or the imaginary kid out there in the world that isn't even in the class. That is not age appropriate. That is grooming. That's what cults do. It's a system. First, I love bomb you. And I tell you how amazing and wonderful and perfect and amazing. And I tell you all the things. You're this, you're this, you're this, you're this. And I label you. And then I tell you how much I love you and appreciate you for those labels. I love this about you. I love that about you. It's not really anything about them, though. It's these superficial labels. And then after you've done that, you connect those labels to opinions, behaviors, feelings that are allegedly supposed to go with them. Things they should be concerned about, things they should be fighting for. Injustice. We got to correct the injustice. So guess what? If the kid goes, I don't want to be mad at my white dad or my white mom, and I don't feel the injustice, whatever. Oh, yeah, about that. So I love you, but okay. So now the kid's like, wait a minute. What happened? I was awesome. I was approved of. And then now I'm not doing it right. What? And it's subtle. It's super subtle. It's never like in your face. It's just like, well, I know it might seem that way, but that's just the internalized racism. And it's not your fault. I'm just trying to help you be a better person. Okay. Classic grooming. And of course, the kid looks at, okay, well, I want to be a better person. What do I do? What are the behaviors? What are the things I say? And then they change and they adopt that. And it's this constant thing. And they become just like a little robot repeating things. And this is my identity. And if they have anxiety around it, it never gets pinned on the school. It's never like, maybe you're constant talking about their identity and their feelings and their mom and their dad and this and that, and poking holes in the people they're closest to. Maybe that's causing their anxiety. Oh no, couldn't possibly be that. It's the terrible racism in the world. And then we add that to the mix of what we have to deal with. Okay, your anxiety, I understand. Do you want to meditate? Do you need to breathe? Do you need to go in the corner? You don't have to take the test. It's okay. You can have extra time. So we just coddle and coddle and coddle. And of course, parent doesn't like this. Most healthy parents, sane parents are like, what have you done to my otherwise strong? I sent a 6-year-old here who was like, and now I have an 8-year-old. Okay. What the hell? And like, oh, you don't understand your child. Are we going to have a problem? Do you need to come and see the counselor? I think you really need to understand little Jimmy, little Johnny, who's now Janie, whatever. And then you're the parent going, what? And the kid, of course, has been given this message too, that, well, if mom doesn't understand or dad doesn't understand, then that's, part of the whole oppression thing. And we have people here, don't worry, we won't tell them what you're doing. So they isolate you from your only reality check on planet Earth, who really does have your best interests at heart. That's what cults do. That is grooming. They say, well, we're doing a kindness. We're doing a good thing. We're protecting them. No, you're not. You're harming them. But that is grooming. You don't need to have to touch the kid ever. Ever. It's all up in here. And I thought this was either a common sense or something that they taught to teachers. But I'm now realizing that if it was common sense or if it was something we just instinctively knew, it was probably a function of a couple of things. This is my theory, and I'll finish with this because I've kept you guys pretty long. Many of us grew up with at least one sibling, if not two. We used to have bigger families in America, and now it's down to like 2 and more single, child families. Okay, so kids, we're also atomized more. We're not running around in the neighborhood playing with all the other kids. So even if we were an only child, there were like the kids across the street and the neighbors next door who had 5 kids and like, kids. Even if you lived in an apartment building. I lived part of my childhood in New York City. There were like kids, there were kids around. So you interacted outside of school, not just in school. People go, socialization all happened in school. No, it didn't. You guys are forgetting. You're forgetting. You're imagining it did. And maybe because you went to a neighborhood school, so you saw the same people after school, but you're imagining that you did all your socializing in the school. Most of it was done outside of school. Or through your parents were friends with other kids' parents and you hung out and you had barbecues and you went to the pool and you went to church and you did these things and you played on a softball team or a football team or gymnastics or this, that. We did more out when we were kids. When I say we, like Generation X and even millennials, I think to a certain degree, just kind of were out and about and doing more and with other people and in the world and with other kids. And so I think by the time people would grow up to maybe be a teacher, it's like, well, I gotta remember children. Like I remember being one more because, we also weren't talked to as much like we were miniature adults. Ironically, we were treated like we were, here's the latchkey, come home when it's dark. So we're treated like we were older than we were, but we were not spoken to like we were adults. I didn't know what my parents' political views were. I didn't know what my teachers' political views were. I didn't know what anybody's sex life was going on. It was like that. There was the adult world and the world of my age group and below. Okay. Didn't know even one age group above me, had no clue what they were doing in their private time. Zero. And it wasn't coming at me 24/7 on any kind of social media of like, look what people do. Look at this. Look what all the big people do. Okay. This wasn't happening. We don't even see in children's programming what children do. It's like even Caillou looks like a little old man. And, the Rugrats are like little snarky adults. And most of the kids in cartoons are acting like little adults. They don't really show kids. And then I think people grow up and they become teachers and they're like, well, aren't they miniature adults? Like, what? Isn't that what? No? I think to a certain degree, they're just butt ignorant. They literally don't realize. When I hear some of them talk, I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? And when they don't have children of their own, they sure don't know. But I've even seen some parents, young parents, this is my baby who's gay. And I'm like, oh my God. I mean, maybe your child will grow up to be gay. That's not the issue. That's perfectly fine. But your baby isn't gay. And yet you see this is my baby. We're not going to decide what the gender is. Like, I mean, they obviously have no recollection of being a child. No memory whatsoever. And I do think that is, the being around children and not being treated like an adult emotionally. And then the other component of that, I think, is just the constant bombarding of information of a more adult nature where you have two things going on. One, you don't really see real minds of children and you're not introduced to that or kept in that space. And then and you're not told to respect it. It's like everybody needs to know immediately how to fix the planet because otherwise they're not going to do it or something. And then, which is part of indoctrination. It's part of why they want to do it and why they're grooming them. But also, I think there's a sense of ever present now with technology. Technology has a way of fooling you into thinking that the past never it's weird. Things get memory hold super fast. And even those of us who are older and, we're used to remembering things from, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and, Challenger disaster and this and that. I just pulled out of my butt, the Ordinary People movie. Okay. More people today, younger people in their 20s and teens and so forth, I've noticed something. They have a hard time remembering last week. They don't remember vacation from last year. I mean, I've tested this out with kids I tutor, with, even my own children. They're like, oh, you remember when we went to Florida last time? And we're talking about less than a year ago. They're like, we went there? It's like, yeah. And then we went to the aquarium and we did the thing. They're like, we did? Like, yeah. And I don't think it's their fault. I think it's this. I think it's new, more, data. The brain gets overwhelmed. It's like dump. They just don't ever get to sit with things and recollect and, just constructive boredom. I always talk about in this channel. It's like just time to stare out the window and remember back to, remember last year when we did the thing and And if you're not talking to people about your memories, right? You're not sitting around the table going, hey, can we go back to that cool place? Or where are we going on vacation? Remember last year we did? If you're not having these conversations, don't need that. But I do need to know all the tokens I need for the next character on the Genshin game. It's just a matter of what's getting stored in the database. And then they grow up and be teachers. So it's now, it's today, it's right now. What's the thing? Today, now. I don't pick up from them at all that they have even the smallest notion of what a child's brain is like. Developmentally, like what it's capable of understanding and what it's capable of feeling. and I'm giving them credit that if they did know, they would maybe not do what they do. I mean, some of them still would, because I do think there is mendacity going, there is that. There are people who want to indoctrinate your children. Absolutely. There are probably more than I even want to think about, but I don't think it's all of them. I think there are well-meaning people out there who are just like, this is what we're supposed to do. This is what the experts told us we should do. This is being kind. This is being compassionate. This is being inclusive. This is being relevant. Relevant. No. Relevance to a 10-year-old is not whatever's happening today in the world. That's their world is this. Your world as a 25 or 30-year-old is much bigger. And tragically, probably not as big as it ought to be, because you probably haven't read half the things you ought to have read, and you haven't traveled as much as you should have, and you haven't, at least in books and other things, and you really don't have the perspective you ought to have to be speaking so knowledgeably on all of these topics of economics and philosophy and, geopolitics and every other thing that they love to expound on like they're experts to 10-year-olds. So anyway, that's what I wanted to talk about. That I think we are using tragedy to propagandize children. We need to stop doing it. Parents, your role is now that this is one more time, maybe reach out to your school district and say, hey, can we not do this again? Can we not do this anymore at all? Because it's not helpful. And be aware of what they're saying to your kids. And I don't know how to tell you to counteract it other than what I said, which is reassure them they are safe. Statistically, they are safe. Okay. And, it's absolutely awful what happened, but the likelihood of it happening exactly that way again, to your specific child is, they're more likely to get hurt on their way to school in the car. Not that you should say that. Obviously, don't say that. I just meant, perspective is an important thing as far as like saying, one of the things I would say to my kids is, how many grocery stores are there that you can even just see driving around town? Oh my God, there's the Harris Teeter, and there's the Publix, and then there's the other Publix, and then there's the Food Line, and then, oh my gosh, and then there's the Trader Joe's down the street. Okay. So lots of grocery stores, right? How many do we go to? Like 2 or 3 sometimes. Okay. How often do we go? So we kind of like go through the things and help them to realize like, yeah, nothing's happening. Right. So then you feel like you're good. It's all good. You're safe. They need to know that. They need to know that. And believe it or not, even the older kids need to know that. You might present it differently, but even they, don't be so sure that your teenagers are walking around feeling perfectly safe after an event like this. You just don't need to bring it up. I'm just saying, like, if they bring it up, that's what you might talk about. But the school is not the group of people to bring it up. All right. Thank you so much, you guys. I really appreciate it. If you would consider sharing this out with other parents who might find it of interest, I would appreciate that. If you're not already subscribed to the channel, please consider doing that as well. And I thank you, and I hope you all have a wonderful evening.